Welcome to Anuga F&B Talks. In this series, we are inviting global players and innovators from the industry to share their stories and showcase their innovation in anticipation of Anuga 2025, the biggest trade show for the food and beverage industry worldwide. Thanks for tuning in.
I just had the opportunity to chat with Sabine from the German Institute for Frozen Food about their presence at Anuga and where the industry is headed. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lucas. It was a pleasure to be here and to talk about frozen food. And everybody is invited to visit us at our booth at Anuga 2025 and celebrate with us 70 years of frozen food in Germany. Thank you.
Sabine, welcome to our little studio here at Kitchen Town. Great to have you for our Anuga F&B Talks. We want to talk today about frozen food. You're from the DTI, the German Frozen Food Institute, representing the companies in that area, in that industry. And yeah, it is quite an anniversary this year at Anuga because you introduced, or your organization introduced frozen food for the first time 70 years ago, and it was happening at Anuga at that time, right?
Yeah, hi Lucas. Thank you for inviting me, and it's great to be here, and it's an honor to speak about frozen food in the context of Anuga because it's true. In 1955, the first 5 frozen products were presented at the Anuga. And this was the starting point, at least in Germany, for a tremendous success story of frozen food companies at that time. And we are still seeing a lot of new companies entering the market and bringing new ideas to the frozen business.
So a lot of innovation until today. For me, particularly interesting would be like how at that time, the industry and also the consumers, how were they reacting to the introduction of frozen foods?
Yeah, you must imagine that at these times, nobody really knew in Germany these products.
Yeah.
We had the same development in the United States, where the frozen food was invented in the 1930s by a guy called Clarence Birdseye. And in Germany, these developments took place 20 years later. So starting at 1955, if you remember these times after the Second World War, there was no infrastructure in the households concerning freezers, for example. So that it was something that has to be grown and developed by the time. And not only at home, these freezers were missing, but also in the retail business. The supermarkets, as we know them nowadays, were not yet existing. So these were small outlets where you find retailers normally with a white coat dressed and selling the products individually to the customers. And so in these times, it was very important to explain the products, to tell the people what it is. Can I eat it frozen? Do I have to heat it up? Does it keep the nutrients? And all these questions, of course, were there. And in these times, I think it was very good to have the collaboration between all the people and all the partners in the frozen food chain that are needed to produce a product, to transport it, to sell it. And that is also why the German Frozen Food Institute was founded in these times. We are our existence, it goes back to 1956. So 1 year after the Anuga, there was DTI, and so there was a lot of necessity.
Was it, like, maybe to interrupt you briefly, was it due to the reason that the, say, innovators at that time at Anuga noticed quite quickly that they would actually need systemic innovation, not only one single product? Was that also based on the initial feedback?
I think exactly. I used to say that at these times the frozen food industry in Germany is a startup industry. Yeah, now we are 70 years old and not a startup anymore. Of course, including many startups, but at these times, really a startup business.
Yeah.
What do you need? A product, you need partners, you need lots of technology. You need people that understand the supply chain, who can organize it. You must rely on each other, so you must build up confidence between business partners, and that's why the initial situation for DTI was to include industrial partners, logistics partners, and retailers. And that's why also in 1956 there was a so-called Köln-Bonner Truhen test, so a freezer test in the retailer with retailers in 500 markets, where they put the first freezers as we know them nowadays and test these products and collect market data and feedback from the customers. And I think that is really a modern approach and still nowadays needed. The formats nowadays are a bit different, but I think the core of this idea is still the same. Yeah, you must bring a lot of people together to understand and to work together on a whole supply chain.
Makes sense. Yeah, and obviously the per capita consumption is quite high today for all these products. What was the main driver, or maybe there have been different drivers for the development during the time since the first introduction?
So there are lots of drivers. I think the main point where it started is the storage of foods, to preserve foods, to give a long shelf life to it, and to give food safety to the people. Because that in these times, in the 30s, 40s, it was not as it is nowadays. We have almost 100% food safety in the European and Western countries. And that was not guaranteed in these times. So it was a big, let's say, success of the cooling, of the freezing industry to achieve this. And then, of course, with the starting point, once you have the food safety, then you can start thinking about quality of trends, nutrition profiles that you want to give to the people, to the consumers, and all this stuff. So then in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it started so-called convenience products, because there was also a big change in our societies. The usual role, for example, of women started to change. Yeah, in the beginning, in the 1950s in Germany, the usual role was a housewife. Yeah, there was no other way. Until 1970, you needed to ask your husband if you are allowed to work. Yeah. So nowadays, impossible to think that. Yeah? It's not so long ago. But then in the 60s, 70s, this started, and the women also started to work. And there were other technologies available in the kitchens, of course, the freezers at home, for example, the ovens and all that stuff. And so the food industry had the chance to make other offers to the people, to give products that were pre-cooked, pre-baked. So that makes the life a bit easier. You don't need to spend so much time with cooking. And there have been in many advertisement spots of these times. Nowadays it's funny to look at it, but they were also playing with this. There was the housewife, very nicely dressed, waiting for the husband, bringing maybe a guest, a colleague or something like that, and then, hooray, everything is fine arranged. Here's my frozen product. I have a very, very good product, high quality, but I didn't need to invest much money. And the people and the women in these spots, advertisement spots, were very proud, very on the one hand, and also very modernly styled. So it's a new way of living that was introduced and gave a lot of freedom. And I think looking at women nowadays and families nowadays, I think it's still the same. We have been everybody has been learning that with COVID, for example, when we had the pandemic and everybody was at home, everybody learned how complicated it is to organize daily life with different meals for different persons at different times. So there, the convenience aspect is very important, and frozen foods are in the heart of the heart of its DNA. It's really convenience.
So really interesting also to look at that development over time, really, because you had really in the first place it was all about the food safety and the aspect of just serving the people who were in need of good products in the first place, but then also, as you mentioned, the convenience aspect, but also the society aspects that come with this convenience, if you will. Like one common prejudice, and I can imagine that also dates back a little bit longer, is the nutrient aspect. So how is the current industry response to that? Because I can imagine that still people are raising the question if the food is in the same nutrient quality than fresh food would be.
Yeah, of course, it's still a question. There are always new generations of consumers, and you need to educate them in the sense, to talk about these aspects. And it is, in fact, it's scientifically proven that frozen product, especially can show that with vegetables and fruit very well, that it keeps its nutrients for a very long time. And if you look at vegetable that is coming from a farm, going to a supermarket, it already has some days of transport. It stays some days in the supermarket, then maybe stays some days in the fridge at home. So there's losing, and during this period, it's losing very quickly its vitamins and nutrients. And this doesn't happen with the frozen foods. Or it's very, very, very slowly for months. And that is one of the main advantages, the freshness. And many people, the experts that I know from the industries always say, I'll give the example, which I find is very nice. The gold standard, if you want so, is you harvest your vegetable from your own garden and go to your kitchen and cook it or something like that. But the need to come the near as possible to this gold standard is frozen food. Because it's natural. You don't need any conservatives to make it to give it a long shelf life. But you can keep the freshness, the nutrients, only by the cold temperatures.
Okay. I just maybe two other aspects that may be of importance in the overall context of frozen food. One is, and you briefly touched upon that point, because one aspect is clearly also the food waste aspect. Because we all know that about 1/3 of the overall food produced is wasted. That also is true for the retail step, not only the home consumption step. So this is one thing that I can imagine you also put in front of the people as one clear benefit of the frozen food technology. But on the other hand, you also have the energy consumption topic, because we can all imagine that the cooling chain or the frozen chain needs a lot of energy. So what is the current, how do you balance these pros and cons of the thing?
These are very important topics of sustainability. These both points that you touched. And talking first about food waste, it's true. That's one of the biggest challenges I think we have to really to overcome. We have to find solutions, because in Germany, average households throws away 113 kilograms of food. And what does it mean? In the end, you throw away your money, but you also throw away resources from nature. You throw away energy, everything. So I think that is something that we really have to change. And if you look at the different food groups, food categories, of course there are some that have very short shelf life, and the people have problems to deal with that. Of course, we have fridges and freezers and so, but in our lifestyle nowadays, we are not very, often not very consistent. Yeah, we buy things, then it's in the fridge, then we decide other things. We go to a restaurant, or we have other things to do. So then we don't cook, and what happens? The food is spoiling in the fridge, and this especially tackles the categories like vegetables, fruits, and bakery products, meat also, and in these specific food groups, you can really make a difference with a frozen product. And as we have been discussing before, you have for the vegetables, you have the high vitamins and the freshness, and the nutrient profile is perfect. And you have that advantage that it doesn't get spoiled. You don't need to throw it away. And the consumers also know it. We have been doing several surveys on it, and there's a really big difference between the people that admit that they throw away fresh food, and most of the people say, no, frozen food, I don't throw it away. So it happens less times. So that's the way, one solution to solve the problem. So, and talking about the energy consumption, of course, that's something that is in our society where we talk about a lot of climate change and sustainability. It's very important. It is, of course, also for the industry. And the one thing is that industry and logistics partners, cold storage, the retailers, everybody in the frozen food chain is constantly working on progress, to achieve progress, to use less energy, to use more renewable energy, for example. And that is the one side. On the other side, if you look at the carbon footprint of a frozen food product, and we have been doing scientific studies on that, normally what you see is, doesn't matter what it is, maybe a burger, maybe a cake. The biggest part of the footprint comes from the raw materials that are used. Yeah. So from is it a vegetarian plate? Is it something with meat or fish? Yeah. Then of course the footprint is higher than it's from fish and meat products than it is from purely vegetable products. That is the main difference. And if, as a consumer, I want to make a difference, I can choose a vegetarian or vegan product to emphasize this point. But the percentage of the carbon footprint coming from logistics, storage, and energy consumption during the production, it's quite small. It's quite small. It's normally it's overestimated.
So you say that it's overestimated not only by consumers but also
as a consumer you have the choice between vegetarian and non-vegetarian plates or products, and you can make a difference in how you go buying your products. If you use a car to go to the supermarket, not such a good idea. Maybe with an electric car, but not with a normal carbon emission vehicle. The other thing is what kind of appliances do you have in your household? Do you have the latest generation of freezers, of ovens, and so on?
Hi, I'm Jan Philipp from Anuga, and if you want to meet associations as the German Institute for Frozen Food, visit Anuga in October 2025 and visit the biggest trade show for the food and beverage industry. We are looking forward to see you there.
What can the industry do to also maybe take a stronger role in these aspects? So really pointing out and also pushing the, as you say, highly efficient cooling chains, and make people maybe more aware of the frozen technology as a means to also reduce their food waste if they maybe do not fully understand so far. So I can imagine that there's a lot more potential in it besides just selling the cake or the fries or the ready meal.
Yeah, interesting question. We put the same questions to ourselves as an institute, because we are, of course, as an institute.
I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but that's especially important because obviously there are still so many prejudices that we just briefly talked about.
Yeah. That's true. The first thing is you need to have a solid scientific basis on which you can communicate these topics. That is what we are doing. I told you we did measure these carbon footprints in 2012. We are doing it now in 2024 again. And what we expect is to see a development, a positive development, with a reduction of carbon emissions, of course. That is one thing. The next thing is how to explain these things to consumers. What we also see is that many people in Germany, and I think in all the Western countries, there is more interest for sustainability topics. But the problem is these topics are normally, it's not so easy to explain it. And if you look at how you make your consumption decisions, it's only a very small period of time. And how can I catch the interest of the person at this time?
Course,
So we need to think more about how to communicate it, because the people want an easy solution. They want something that is practical for their lives. And if they understand, well, that's practical for my life, that gives me an advantage, that's an easy way for me to make my life more sustainable, I think that's the way to think about it. That's why we will start our communication concept around this study in these months. And we hope to come out with a good idea and solution. And maybe we can present this solution already a bit at the Anuga and discuss also with the business people if that's a good communication idea.
Oh, that's an interesting.
We have to work on it.
Okay, all right. To maybe just come to an end, where is the industry headed in the short term, mid-term, long term in your perspective? So obviously we just unveiled or uncovered a lot more potential also for innovation and also communication, as you explained. But is there anything else you expect for the next years?
Oh yes, I think there are many things going on the technological side. Everything that has to do with make freezer technologies even smarter, digitalization, artificial intelligence, all these big trends, of course, also are important in the frozen business. Reducing energy, that's a very big point for us. On the other hand, of course, people are also looking for new products. And there are the topics, of course, the more vegetarian diet, vegan diets, or more proteins, alternative proteins. All these new ideas that the startups brings, many of them, can be a really success story in frozen food. Why is that so? Because normally when you start in the startup business, food business, in the beginning you have a small quantity of products. You have not so many customers, but if you can have a longer shelf life, that also helps you to bring your idea, your product into the market. And I think that's something that's going to happen, and we see a lot of really interesting products. And we will have on our branch meeting in May, for example, Thilo Hühn from the Zurich University, who is one of the most popular and scientists who is working on technologies and so. And he will tell us also about his ideas on what frozen food can be in the future. And he also says there's a lot of potential still to be detected and to be used. And I think with what we have is we can manage the complexity of our food supply chain, of our frozen supply chain, that works very well in our Western countries, and we can make more of it. So the new ideas are welcome, and I think there's lots of young people that.
Cool. Sounds like you're really an open platform as the DTI,
yes,
and
we are.
I understand that as an innovation also to our audience here to visit
Yes,
you and meet
please.
you and chat with you at Anuga this
come
year.
ahead. We are there.
Cool.
And of course in the Anuga frozen food.
Yeah.
And happy to welcome everybody and discuss and meet and bring people together. Also internationally, we have a group of frozen food institutes and associations all over the world. And so we have our colleagues, for example, from the United States, from the United Kingdom are there, from France, from Spain, etc.
Wow.
So it's a very, very interesting world. It's a very special business, of course, but once you're in it, you're never gonna want to do anything else.
Oh, that's a big promise. Thank you so much, Sabine, for this talk. It was really interesting. And so we have a few products to consume now. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucas. It was a pleasure.